Somebody left a comment under one of Caryn Chandler's Instagram photos calling her a great-grandma to Matt Roloff's grandchildren. It was a compliment. It was meant kindly. Thousands of comments like it appear under the posts of anyone in a blended family, and almost everybody accepts them with a heart emoji and moves on. Caryn corrected it. She does not call herself the Roloff kids' grandmother, she wrote. Not now, not ever. She is Chaa to them, and that is the arrangement. In Touch picked the exchange up, which is how most people outside her follower count ever heard about it. And then it vanished into the churn, the way small moments do, filed under mildly interesting and never examined again. It deserves better than that, because that reply is the most revealing thing Caryn Chandler ever said in public about her position in the Roloff family. Understand first what a name does to a child. Small children do not learn relationships as abstractions. They learn words, and then they build the relationship inside the word. A 3-year-old who says grandma is not describing a genealogical fact. She is naming a whole category of experience. The person who arrives with something in a bag, who is softer about bedtime than her parents are, whose house smells a particular way, who is at every birthday. The word arrives first and the meaning pours into it, which means in a blended family, the naming question is not administrative. Whatever the children are taught to say becomes what those adults are, permanently, in the only language the children have. Grandma is a single occupancy word. There is no version of it a family can split evenly. If 2 women are both grandma, the children will invent a way to tell them apart, and whatever they invent will announce a hierarchy nobody chose. Caryn understood that and made sure the situation never arose. Consider how the alternative plays out, because it is not hypothetical. It happens constantly. 2 women end up sharing a title, and the children solve the collision themselves with whatever adjective is nearest to hand. Grandma Amy and Grandma Caryn, which sounds neutral until you notice the children have just been handed the job of distinguishing between them at every mention. Or worse, one of them becomes grandma and the other becomes grandma something, which is not equality. It is a demotion written into the daily vocabulary of a 4-year-old. Nobody intends any of that. It simply arrives, and once it has arrived, it cannot be undone, because you cannot retrain a household of small children out of a word they have already learned. The name the grandchildren use for her is Chaa, not Grandma Caryn, not Grandma Chaa. Nothing with a grandmother title buried inside it. Chaa, and nothing else. Where it came from is not documented with any certainty. The likeliest reading is the obvious one. The first syllable of Chandler, doubled, which gives you the bouncing, repeated sound that toddlers reach for and hold on to. Others have suggested one of the grandchildren produced it spontaneously, and the adult simply adopted it because it was charming and it stuck. Both are plausible and neither is confirmed. What is not in doubt is that Caryn took it up willingly. She used it. She signed things with it. She let it become her name in that house. There is something worth noticing in the shape of the name itself. Chaa carries no relational information at all. It does not say grandmother. It does not say aunt. It does not say stepmother or friend of the family. It is a sound, not a category. That is precisely why it worked. A name with no relationship encoded in it makes no claim, competes with nothing, and cannot be measured against anybody else's title. It simply means her. The timing lines up with the grandchildren's ages. Jackson, Zach and Tori's eldest, arrived in May of 2017. Ember, Jeremy and Audrey's first, came that September. By 2018 and into 2019, both were forming words and learning who everybody was. Lilah followed, then Bode, then the rest. And each new child inherited the vocabulary the older ones were already using. Amy was grandma. Matt answered to grandpa or papa, depending on the child. Caryn was Chaa. By the time the youngest arrived, the categories had hardened into ordinary fact. No child ever had to be told that Caryn was not their grandmother, because no child ever thought she was. There was a word for her, and it was not that one. It also travels well. Grandma is a word children eventually outgrow the softness of. A teenager says it differently than a toddler does, with a self-consciousness that creeps in around 10 or 11. A nonsense name never acquires that weight. Chaa at 4 and Chaa at 14 sound the same coming out of the same mouth. Whether Caryn thought that far ahead is unknowable, but the effect is real. Now consider what Caryn was actually giving up, because the sacrifice is larger than it looks from outside. She was in that family for 8 years. She managed the farm before she was ever Matt's partner, which means she knew those grandchildren's parents when they were young. She was at the birthdays. She was there through pumpkin seasons, which at Roloff Farms is not a visit, but a month of labor with children underfoot. She was in the Christmas photographs. By any ordinary measure of presence, she had done the work that usually earns the title. Plenty of women in her position would have taken it. Not out of malice, simply by drift. Somebody suggests Grandma Caryn as a solution to an awkward moment. Nobody objects, and within a year, it is what the children say. That is how most of these situations resolve, without anyone ever making a decision. Caryn made a decision instead, and she made it early enough to hold. There is a further reason the decision held, and it has to do with when she made it. The Chaa name was established around 2018 and 2019. That was the good stretch. Matt and Caryn were solid, the farm was functioning, the family conflicts that would dominate the following years had not yet erupted. She was not making a defensive concession under pressure. She was making a choice at a moment when she could easily have pushed for more, and probably got it. Boundaries set in calm weather are the only ones that survive a storm. By the time the farm dispute detonated in 2022, and Zach and Tori were describing the property as no longer a place of joy, the naming question was already years settled. It never became ammunition, because it had been resolved before anybody needed ammunition. Then there is the detail that turns this from a nice gesture into something with real weight. Caryn is a grandmother. Her son Connor and his girlfriend Ashley had a son on August 22, 2021, Liam Joseph Chandler. To Liam, Caryn is grandma, with the whole word and everything in it, by blood and by right and with nobody else's claim to consider. She has been living both arrangements at once, grandma in Arizona, Chaa in Oregon. The same woman, the same warmth, two entirely different titles depending on whose family she is standing in. That parallel is what makes the Instagram reply so precise. She was not refusing the word because she thought it was overreach in general, or because she was uncomfortable with grandmothering, or because she did not love those children. She refused it because she had a working knowledge of what the word actually means and where hers was owed. She had one. She was not taking somebody else's. It is also worth being honest about what the choice cost her, because a decision without a cost is not really a decision. Titles do work in families. They confer standing. Grandma comes with an assumed permanence, an assumed right to be consulted, an assumed place in a photograph nobody has to justify. Chaa came with none of that. It was warm, and it was affectionate, and it was entirely contingent on Caryn's relationship with Matt continuing. She would have known that. Anyone in a long, unmarried partnership knows exactly how conditional their standing is. By declining the permanent word and accepting the provisional one, Caryn was accurately describing a position she may not have enjoyed occupying. She named it truthfully anyway. Look at what the decision prevented, because that is where its value sits. Amy Roloff never had to defend her position. She never had to sit through a conversation about whether the children could call Caryn something similar. She never had to feel her way through a holiday wondering whether her title was quietly being shared out. Whatever else Amy had to manage during those 8 years, and there was a great deal, this was never on the list. The grandchildren never had to hold two women in the same category and work out which was which. Nobody had to say big grandma and other grandma. Nobody had to be told, at 4 years old, something complicated about who counts. Matt never had to referee. That may be the most practical benefit of all. A man in Matt's position, with an ex-wife and a partner at the same Christmas table, has a limited supply of goodwill to spend, and every ambiguity he is forced to arbitrate costs some of it. This ambiguity never existed. He was spared a negotiation he would have handled badly, because Matt has never been especially good at that kind of thing. It is worth measuring that against everything else happening in the family during the same years. Matt put part of the farm on the market in 2022, and the fallout ran for years. Zach and Tori sold their house and left the state. Zach and his father stopped speaking. Jeremy's own attempt to buy in had already collapsed. There was open conflict about money, about land, about who was owed what, playing out on national television and in every comment section attached to the family's name. Through all of that, one thing was never fought over. Nobody ever argued about what the children should call anybody. In a family with that many live disputes, Subtracting one is a genuine contribution. Amy has spoken publicly about being grateful the grandmother question never became a contest. That gratitude was not free-floating politeness. It is the direct product of a choice Caryn made and stuck to. And the security ran in both directions. Because Amy was not defending her ground, she could be generous about Caryn's presence. There is nothing more likely to make a woman rigid about a family gathering than the suspicion that her place is being taken. Remove the threat and the whole system loosens. Caryn got easier access to those children precisely because she had promised not to claim them. There is a fair objection to all of this, and it should be aired rather than skipped. Some viewers watched Caryn's boundary and read it as distance rather than grace. She was Matt's partner for 8 years and his fiancé for 2. In most families, that would be enough to earn some kind of grandparent standing, and a woman refusing it might be signaling that she never fully committed to those children in the first place. Zach and Tori at one point had no plans to introduce their son Josiah to her at all, which suggests the relationship was not universally warm. That reading is not unreasonable. It is simply not what the Instagram reply says. Caryn did not decline involvement. She declined a word. She stayed at the birthdays, stayed through the pumpkin seasons, and stayed in the photographs while refusing the title, which is the opposite of holding back. What Chaa actually was in practice was a real relationship. She was a fixture. She was present at gatherings, involved in farm visits, part of what the grandchildren experienced when they came to Helvetia. She was affectionate, and she was fun, and she was around. None of that was diminished by the name. The word was never a demotion, it was a description. Some adults in a child's life are grandparents, and some are something else, and the something else can be substantial without borrowing a title to prove it. It also gave Caryn something, which is easy to miss in an account that frames her as the one giving things up. A person with no title has no expectations attached to them. Grandmothers are supposed to remember every birthday, produce presents, be available, be equally available to all 8. Chaa was not supposed to be anything. She could be present when she was present and warm when she was there, without a job description hanging over her or anybody keeping score against a standard she had never agreed to. There is a real freedom in an undefined role. She got to be the fun adult rather than an institution. Then, July of 2025 arrived and the whole arrangement ended. Matt and Caryn ended their engagement. She moved to Arizona with her daughter Brittany. She stopped being at the farm, at the birthdays, at the pumpkin season, in the photographs. Chaa was not a name that could survive the separation because it never described a fixed relationship to those children. It described her relationship to Matt, translated into a word small people could pronounce. When that ended, so did the role. She kept the boundary right to the end, incidentally. Nothing in the aftermath suggests she made any claim on those children, contested any access, or framed the separation as losing grandchildren. She had spent 8 years saying she was not their grandmother. When it ended, she behaved like someone who had meant it. What the children carry forward will vary by age, which is how memory works, and nobody can do anything about it. Jackson was 8 by the end of 2025. He will remember Chaa as a real person with a face and a voice. Mirabella, born in May of 2024, will not remember her at all. The middle children will end up with fragments, a sense that somebody was there, attached to a strange, cheerful name, who then was not. That is not a tragedy. It is the ordinary arithmetic of adults moving in and out of children's lives, and it happens in millions of families that no one films. 6 months after the split, Caryn is in Arizona. Brittany is nearby. Liam is 4 and calls her grandma. She holds 1 title now instead of 2, and it is the one that was always hers. There is one more thing the arrangement quietly protected, and it belongs to Caryn rather than to anyone else. Her own grandson never had to compete. Liam was born in August of 2021, into a family where his grandmother's attention was already stretched across a farm in Oregon, a partner, a stepfamily, and 8 children who were not related to him. If Caryn had claimed the Roloff grandchildren as hers, Liam would have been one of 9. By keeping the categories separate, she made sure he was one of 1. That may have been the point all along. It is at least as plausible as the generous reading, and the two are not mutually exclusive. There is a version of this story where that reads as loss. 8 years of Christmases gone, a farm she managed for well over a decade gone, A whole extended family that is no longer hers in any sense. Plenty of women would come out of that bitter. The evidence does not point that way. She went to the family she had a permanent claim on and got on with it, which is roughly what her Instagram reply had been signaling all along. One question hangs over all of this and cannot be answered from outside. Did Caryn decide this herself, or did she read a room? She had worked for the Roloff family before she was ever part of it. She managed that farm. She knew Amy professionally for years, watched the marriage from close range, and understood the emotional geography of that household better than almost any outsider could. A woman with that much inside knowledge might have concluded that the grandmother title was the one thing Amy would not survive losing, and acted accordingly out of self-preservation rather than generosity. Both readings fit the facts. Neither can be proven. What can be observed is the behavior, which stayed consistent for 8 years across 2 engagements, 1 property war, and a family that fractured around her. Motive is unknowable. Consistency is not, and consistency over that length of time is its own kind of evidence. Here is what the whole episode is worth remembering for. Blended families rarely fail over the big questions. They fail over accumulated small ones. Who sits where? Who gets told first? Whose name goes on the card? What the children are taught to say. Every one of those is minor on its own, and none of them are minor in aggregate, because each one is a tiny ruling about whose family this actually is. Most people handle those questions by avoiding them and hoping the ambiguity resolves itself. It does not. It hardens into resentment that nobody can trace back to a cause, because there was never a moment anyone could point to. Caryn handled one of them deliberately, in public, before it could become a problem. She named her own role accurately, declined a word she had not earned, and then behaved consistently with that decision for 8 straight years, through an engagement, a property war, and a family that fractured around her without ever fracturing over this. For a family that spent those same 8 years fighting over a farm, that is not nothing. Was Caryn right to refuse the grandma title, or should she have been allowed it after 8 years in that family? Does it change your reading of her that she was already grandma to a grandson of her own? And do you think Jackson and Ember will remember Chaa when they are grown?